I think it's doing the right thing even when no one's looking. And that's what I try and tell my kids, because bad habits are good habits. It's easy to develop habits, and sometimes good habits can trump bad habits. But it's what you do on a daily basis, and it's that consistency of who you are, and the kind of developing the depth of your character.
Our company was built on the foundation of metals, and ferrous, non-ferrous metals, and we really weren't in the space of electronics services. The idea was, let's get in that space. It's adjacent to what we do. It's a growth area, and it's a huge need in locally and throughout the country and throughout the world.
I think you look around Oshkosh and you look at the things we have. We have this wonderful university. We have the waterfront. We have these wonderful businesses. We have caring people. We have people who are passionate here. We have people like you who are opening businesses and starting to.
Well, for those of you guys that haven't had a chance to check out these live podcasts, The Local Legends is a series where the Venture Project and the Chamber of Commerce have put together a program where about once a month we feature some notable business leaders in the Oshkosh Fox Valley area. Today we're very fortunate to have three guests, the famous or maybe infamous Lasky brothers. So we've got Mark, Jason, Brad Lasky here that are hopefully going to be able to inspire us and bring some education around their journey as business leaders, but also tell us a little bit more about Sadoff and what that looks like, and how their company has kind of come to exist, how they've maintained their growth, and how we can, as entrepreneurs and business leaders in the community, also learn from things that they've learned. So without any further ado, join me in welcoming the Lasky brothers.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, first we'll get some rules out of the way. So we don't really have too many direct questions to any one of you. Feel free to chime in and pick up where anyone left off. And when you're talking to the mic, try to bring it as close as possible to the mouth so we can make sure we get this in post-production. But I just wanted to, I wanted to kick this off and just kind of understand your upbringing from childhood, kind of how that worked, and being part of a family business and what that looked like. So bring us back to the youth and experience, and how you guys evolved from sparring partners to business partners in such a way. Who wants
Still
to
sparring partners, but it's all good.
Do you want to start? I can start, sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having us. This is a unique opportunity, and for us to tell our story and to do this together is really kind of just a cool thing overall. I would say this, and Jason and Brad, they can chime in as well, but there was really never any expectation that we were going to come into the business. It was actually kind of a shock. And maybe that's because I've said it this way. Our dad was the son-in-law. So it wasn't direct lineage. Sometimes when you have maybe patriarchal or matriarchal family businesses where it's all one family, that can be a little different. Our dad was the son-in-law of the founder, and so he actually was in finance in Chicago. Met our mom in Chicago. Moved up here. Our grandfather. Our grandfather lived until he was 96 years old, but he had convinced everyone he was dying for about 30 years. So, and that was a way to, I think, kind of guilt our father to come up and join the business. He came into it in 1972, and was the second generation. We had an understanding that we had a family business, and in high school we would work at various locations, but there was never any pressure. I can tell you that, nor expectation. Our parents wanted us to carve our own path, and if that included the business, and that was something we really wanted to do, I think they would have supported it. But it was never fostered or foisted upon us.
Did you have interest going somewhere else in your childhood, or where did you kind of picture yourself ending up?
Yeah, I had no I had no intention of coming to the business. I thought I was going to be I wanted to go into public relations for a professional sports team. And then later I was on, actually right prior to coming into the business. It was almost sold, and that's another story. In the late 90s, I was on my way to Northern Arizona University to get my master's in I was going to become an English teacher. So that was right prior. So
Jason, did you have any other aspirations, or what were you kind of thinking?
I was confused. I went to college in Denver. I went to the University of Denver. Spent my college career there, and it was time for me to leave because school was over, and I was confused. I didn't know what to do. So I decided that my grandfather gave us the privilege of being able to attend college, and so I thought that if I didn't offer like a return respect to learn about the opportunity that brought me this far in my education, then I'd be missing out on something. And so I decided at that time when I graduated that I'd come home and give 5 years to the company to learn about it and to experience what it was like, and to learn what my grandfather had afforded me through that opportunity.
Very interesting. Do you have any thoughts on, so I know some other folks with family businesses, they insist on sending their children to do a different industry or something else before they're even kind of allowed into the business. And I think that it seems like you kind of took a different approach, where it's like you wanted to see what it was all about to decide if you wanted to be into it.
Correct. And not having the expectations of our parents really putting those expectations or pressures on us to do something else first, it was more of a challenge because coming into our business, at least from my perspective, without a dedicated skill set, and trying to develop that as it was happening in my business, and having people look at me in ways that that I wasn't necessarily looked at just as an employee, right? I was looked at as a business owner. So things that they would task me to do were a little bit different than the expectations they had in some other people. So it was very difficult from my perspective growing up in our business like that, where I think I would have had a little bit easier time being a little bit more pegged into something like originally, but our father was really afraid to do that. He really didn't want to pigeonhole us in something and kind of scare us away. So he left it up to us to kind of develop our own interests within the business. But like I had said, that made it a little more difficult.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Brad?
So my first experience with the company was on the Oshkosh Youth Soccer Club, representing Block Salvage Company. So I got to play as a youth and really get a feel for what it meant to represent our company, and went away to college, University of Miami. Ended up transferring, finished school at the University of Denver. So I followed him and then followed him. And there's a little bit of a path here because I'm the youngest, so I got to watch these two and see their decision making and really learn, from them, and also take my own path. So after college, I was a snowboard instructor out in Beaver Creek, Colorado, taught kids. And that was a big company. I worked for Vail Resorts, and I got to see how a big organization works, got to work with kids, got to do something a little different, something I loved, but also had the responsibility of being somewhere and working for somebody else. So then I came back in 2004 and, just had a similar experience that Jason had. Didn't have a real seat in the company, was trying to figure out, where my value was. I actually went back to school to get my master's degree in Oshkosh, graduated in 2009 with an MBA, and then, really just worked hard and stuck with it. And my experience was, like I said, a little similar to Jason's, that I had to really try to figure out what I wanted to do.
So you didn't know what you wanted to do as a kid yet, really?
No, I just really never was pushed into it. But what I did know was that I saw through my grandfather and my father this unbelievable organization with great people, and that was something that I really wanted to be a part of, and the responsibility of working alongside with people and providing livelihoods was something that I think was a bigger picture for me. But getting there was a little different because of having an ownership stake and also trying to figure out what that was. And I think others, that journey was a little bumpy at times, but I think we had some grit and some survival skills that my grandfather had and stuck with it. So
yeah, I think it's really interesting hearing from the three of you, because it seems like in family businesses there's a certain archetype when it comes to succession planning that the children will be involved, and it's expected. And your father seemed to have took a more laissez-faire approach to let you guys discover that. And I think all three of you had somehow come into that with that approach, which I think is really interesting.
I can tell you, Aaron, that the next generation, and right now we're not in a conversation with the next generation coming in, but when that time comes to have that conversation, we have all kind of aligned that outside experience is important and it helps you build character. And so we would take those steps of kind of enforcing a little bit more of a stepped approach to come into the business.
Okay.
Just as being more responsible to have them develop, I think, better and have better experience.
And bring something different to the
100%.
organization. Sure. So we kind of came in, kind of to the middle of the history of Sadoff. Take me back to the beginning of Sadoff.
He's really good at
So, well, we'll see. I guess we're going to find out. So if we go back in the time machine, 1947, our grandfather, who was he was an immigrant, came here. It was now Ukraine. It was part of the Soviet Union in the when they escaped in the 1920s. The Bolshevik Revolution was going on. He grew up with dirt floors, didn't speak the language, had an 8th grade education, came over to the United States through Canada. And I mean, literally, their family was paying smugglers to get him over and things like that. Some of the things that you see even happening today. They got to the United States, and he eventually met our grandmother in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, and he convinced he had a variety of jobs. We all got our height from our dad's side, but our mom, he was about 5'8". And just a ferocious personality, but could be an absolute sweetheart too. But they liked his size because he actually, one of his jobs was he was a welder on World War II submarines in Manitowoc. That was one of the jobs he had there. So anyway, he always said that if you're not the lead dog, your view never changes. That was just kind of his philosophy in life. He wanted to do his own thing and bet on himself. And he convinced a bank in Chicago and his wife's family in Manitowoc to lend him some money, and he bought the Block Salvage Company in 1947 in Oshkosh on East 10th Avenue, which we still have a location today. That's the original. That's where we started. Fast forward in the time machine a little bit, 1964, he and a silent partner, Jerry Wexler, who used to own the Drake Hotel in Chicago. Some of you might remember that, and actually was famous for another reason. He was the stepfather of Daryl Hannah. If you remember the movie Splash, if you're of a certain age, you might remember that one. But he was a silent partner. He backed him, and he bought the Sadoff family out, Sadoff Iron and Metal in Fond du Lac in 1964. The yard, which is now our headquarters, our facility there in Fond du Lac has been around since about 1906. That yard there, but our history with it is 1964, and then just through a variety of organic growth, greenfield operations, and buying operations, and growing with customers, we grew to our current size. 9 physical locations, 6 in Wisconsin, 3 in Nebraska. We do business in 44 states. We export. We have 245 employees, and that's kind of the size and scope of the business. I said our dad joined in 1972. We did have another, what Block Salvage Company ended up becoming was the Block Iron and Supply Company, which might be familiar to some of you because it's still in existence. Our grandfather's answer to, because we basically manufacture a commodity, so he said, you're either the prince or the pauper in our industry, because you're at the mercy to some degree of commodity markets. And so his answer to that, like a good investment advisor would tell you, is to diversify your portfolio. So instead of, he didn't have the means necessarily to diversify into stocks and bonds and to all that at that time. So what he did is he went into a variety of businesses. And Block Iron became kind of a little mini conglomerate. We had architectural hardware door and frame business, a contractor supply business, fasteners. We were doing fasteners, and a steel service center, which used to be part of Alro Steel, and before that was Block Iron across the street on 10th Avenue. One of my jobs, and I know the name of the podcast is Local Legends. One of the true local legends of Oshkosh, Mark Martin, who was our general manager there and still in Oshkosh for 35 years, was getting ready to retire. And I needed to cut my management teeth, and so I took over that job. We decided in 2006 as a family to focus on the scrap part of our business because we were neither here nor there in some of these other businesses, and they all needed capital resources, human resources, and we were just split. So we divested of that business in 2006. We sold the Steel Service Center to Alro Steel, a family-owned business out of Jackson, Michigan. Actually sold it for less than we could have, but they promised they'd keep all the people, and that was really important to us. And then Block Iron Supply, which still exists, the architectural hardware door and frame business, we sold to 3 of our internal managers, and that still exists to this day. They're over on Witzel, and they just did an expansion. So those guys are doing very well.
I wanted to, I think this is really interesting, just how you have kind of taken and progressed it. But I want to go back to that one statement that your grandfather said: "If you're not the lead dog, your view never changes." Tell me what you think about that. Kind of reflecting on it, what you thought he meant and what that means from entrepreneur's perspective.
I can't put myself in his shoes. What he saw in his life. We actually have my uncle and my mom. They did a video interview with him several years ago, probably in the early 90s, decades ago, and we still have the video, and they actually transcribed it into a book. And he saw things people should never see, and especially at ages that they should never see those things at. So the tenacity and the worldview he had, and just he wanted to. There's always people that doubted him. Even he would tell you his wife's family, thought this is never going to go anywhere. This is you'll never make anything of yourself, and he used that as fuel to the fire. So listen, that's not for everybody. That might be a personality type, but we're sure grateful as a family that he had it, because it allowed for the business to start and then grow, and we're the benefactors of that, of being able to, and have that privilege to be able to take it forward.
Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit about all 3 of you and your working dynamic, because it's relatively unusual to be able to kind of work together, especially in a family business. We'll start with you, Brad, and just kind of what your role is, where you find that your strengths and how you navigate working with everyone.
I will say that we have worked extremely hard on our dynamic. We've worked with different consultants. We've worked with family therapists. We've put in the work. It wasn't always like this. It was a bumpy road, as family dynamics can often do. We're proud that we stuck with it, and we love each other, and I think we learned that what happens around the kitchen table, it's work, and it's also family. But at the end of the day, we're family. So that's from my perspective. I've got to watch again my position in the family dynamic. I get to learn, I get to listen, I get to watch, and I try to take the best of what I see and apply it to how I conduct myself and move forward. So,
in what ways do you think you contribute the best, or where do you think your strengths really operate in the dynamic?
I would say, I'm always trying to learn. I'm always trying to improve. I'm not perfect. There's a lot of things that I know can be improved upon, and I think I'm always trying to think about how can I make things better. I have 4 young kids, and spontaneity is not very. It's very hard to be spontaneous in my life. So right now, so I'm always trying to find that a way to do something different, make it better. As they say, try to leave what you have in a better place than when you found it.
Yeah. I asked this question to a lot of people who have been in the audience, and it's very difficult, I think, for business leaders to try to weigh the difference between this is things that are working and have worked, kind of the tradition of the business, and then to your point, there's this opportunity to improve and innovate. And some companies fall too far on the innovate side; they end up reinventing the wheel.
And I would also just add, and I think Jason can talk about this. We are in that innovative space right now, where we have the core business, and we're looking to do some other things and not just be stick with our core. We're trying to balance that with smart growth or try new things, and I think always trying to look out look at where you are, but also look ahead is really important.
So how do you, let's break that down for just a minute too. So of what, if you could say, percentage of resources would you say would be towards innovation, R&D, looking at new things, looking at diversifying or acquiring a competitor, or vertical integration, horizontal integration, that kind of new stuff, versus their core business that works, has made money, and it continues to make money? I mean, if you could give a ratio or a thought, any thoughts on that, I think are helpful just for people like us, I think, to try to figure out.
We have an advantage in the fact that there's three of us. So we can split some of our responsibilities up, and part of what I'm doing is taking more of the innovation role with an electronics recycling company. So it's our company was built on the foundation of metals and ferrous, non-ferrous metals, and we really weren't in the space of electronics services. And the idea was, let's get in that space. It's adjacent to what we do. It's a growth area, and it's a huge need in locally and throughout the country and throughout the world. And there's a lot of bad things that can happen with electronics getting dumped in other countries. And so we took the step of looking at purchasing another company, and almost had a deal done, and that deal fell through. And we had the conversation and said, if we were going to spend X to buy a company, let's spend X to invest in ourselves. And so we did it organically. We learned a lot. We asked a lot of questions. We fell a little bit, and we kind of found our feet. And so we've had the flexibility of us as a workforce, the three of us, to be able to take some of those responsibilities and shift and share them, which has been helpful. So
from like a company standpoint, I think that's really interesting. You had the opportunity to basically make versus buy a capability. And you said because the deal fell apart, you were able to actually say, well, we could do this we could insource this. We could do this in-house. What was it that you started to see, reflecting on it? Was that a good idea? Was it a better idea, or what do you think?
I would just add that I think, if you buy it, it can shorten the learning curve for sure, but it can be more expensive. So it would be, doing it ourselves was probably less expensive, but the learning curve was longer.
Took more energy and resources. Yep. And things like that.
And so over time, you'll find out if that's a good decision or not. but really, it's about learning and being and developing and taking a chance and being okay to make a mistake or fail, really. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to be able to take calculated risk and try to do new things but not put yourself in a position where you can't continue what got you there.
Absolutely. From Brad's point, the learning curve was harder, so it was probably a little bit more expensive, or took a little bit more time for us to develop what we were doing and to find our cadence. But it also, challenged us to also be able to figure it out ourselves. And we that deal would have brought a different culture into our business. We're 230 people, and so we have our own culture as we exist today. And I think it was better for us to, in some ways, to organically build our own culture through this new business, rather than trying to onboard another culture as well that has its own challenges. And not that those aren't something you can overcome, but I think it allowed us to work within our own system and ecosystem to be able to develop it with our own resources that gave us, it was kind of empowering for other people to see it happen as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really, it's an intangible benefit that it's hard to put a price on, is what you're describing as you're taking an existing culture, which could come with all the good things and bad things of that, or building one internally when you're looking at a make versus buy decision like that.
You're absolutely right. And what we've experienced is this division that we have now for electronics recycling specifically has its own mini culture. And I didn't expect that when we onboarded it within ourselves, but it was natural that it kind of took its own shape and took its own really took its own life because it's different. It's different enough where the dynamics of what that business has to do to be successful allow it to just be a little bit standalone-ish. And that difference within our organization does set it apart and does create benefits, but also some of those challenges of we have created another culture within our business as well.
Yeah. I think one thing I'm kind of getting at is a similarity that I see a lot with business executives and an entrepreneur and successful business executives and successful business entrepreneurs is they have very different responsibilities, but one thing they have in common is they're both extremely effective at where they focus resources. And getting that down is very difficult. So I want to hear kind of from your standpoint when it comes to acquisitions, when it comes to innovating, when it comes to these types of things, how you make those decisions or what your process is for figuring out where are we going to put our energy and what do we look like, if you could break it down to a simpleton like myself.
Can I share a little bit of a secret? We rely on really good people. We don't think that we have all the answers ourselves, and we know that we don't. And so we seek people and talent in our organization, outside of our organization, that can help us. And I think it's that we have an open mind to ask for that assistance and ask for expertise in areas that there are experts in, that we want to know more in. But if we were just to go and try to figure it ourselves, it's not the best or most efficient or most cost-effective way. So we're not afraid to rely on others. And I think that's key.
And I would just add that, looking back at my father and his strengths, he's really a relationship person. And it's really been a trademark of our company. It's our relationships. It's our partnerships internally and externally. And it's something I really look up to him for. And also my mom. They just were very influential in relationships and how to conduct yourself and work with people and depend on. It takes a village. You have to really trust others and work with others and try to share that vision and get people to come along.
Sure.
So,
did you have any thoughts on that, Mark?
I think that they said it very well. I think that as far as the process, we say no to a lot more than we say yes to.
Sure.
And I think some of the thing that we've talked about is doing the research on something, taking the deep dive and getting to know can be just as valuable, if not more valuable, than getting to yes. And it doesn't invalidate what you did to get to know. It probably saves you, in some cases. So we also develop some filters, I think, internally of what we're looking for, what makes sense from a size. From one of the things we've talked about is, we don't want to get to a point where we over leverage the company where it's owned by the bank and not us. No offense, Michelle and Emma, but that's kind of been a primary driver is to stick to our knitting and do things that make sense from a standpoint of an investment situation.
I think that's helpful to visualize. What are some of those filters? Like, how do you know when something is kind of in your wheelhouse, in your core competencies, or when are you looking to, when you're making an acquisition? What are those things you're looking for, or in general, when are they related versus unrelated, or this is a no criteria for sure, or things like that?
I think culture is big. I mean, we've spent 3 generations developing the culture that we want, and still working on it. It's a work in progress. So I think that's part of it. And then how does the business does it complement? Is it totally separate? Do we have the resources to dedicate to it if it's something outside of our main kind of wheelhouse? Sure. So I think all those things come into it. There can be a lot of if you buy a company, you're also buying their culture, and that can be a good thing or a bad thing or a neutral thing. But to put your stamp on it and make sure that you have a lot of people focus on the economic portion of an acquisition, but there's a very human portion and culture portion and if that doesn't work, it's going to negate all the economic advantages that you thought you had.
Yeah, you had mentioned a few years back you had divested some different aspects as well. I think I read a lot about acquisitions with companies, but there's certainly an art to when is the right time to divest. What's your thoughts on when that time comes, or how those decisions get made, or what usually are the triggers to start indicating things?
I will just say that was probably one of the first things that happened when I entered the company. In 2004, I entered the company, and I think that was around 2006, but those discussions have been ongoing. So that was one of the first things that I saw coming into the business was we wanted to focus and really work on our core the things that we were interested in, and while protecting the businesses that were ongoing and divesting or closing down the things that weren't working. And I think the lesson was that, sometimes things don't, or they take their journey and there's a finale to them. But that was my first experience.
Sure.
Well, there was kind of a unique story to that too. Is our general manager at the time, who has since retired, Judy Williams, who was she was running our steel service center business. Just a great leader and manager, and we were kind of in a middle. We were in halfway to nowhere with that business. We were big enough that we had a lot of fixed costs. We had a lot of we had inventory. We had customers, but we weren't large enough that we had any leverage with our suppliers. And she came to us, and she kind of said, I'm a little worried. We're kind of in this middle zone here, and I feel like there's consolidation in our industry that we could get swallowed up. And we took a deeper dive and looked at it and said, I think she's right. And if we're not going to put splitting the resources, the human and the capital resources, into developing this area of the business, then it's going to die on the vine, and we didn't want that to happen. So that started the trigger, and that was the largest of our businesses of that kind of that mini conglomeration. So then we went with leveraging resources that we didn't have internally. We worked with William Blair out of Chicago. As we were the sell side, and we had some things that were core to us as a philosophy. We wanted the people. She came to us, with this concern, and we didn't want to burn our people. I mean, that wasn't the driver. We still had the main mothership business with the scrap side, and we were going to focus on that. And so we put some shackles on the investment bank as to what kind of deals we'd be looking for, and it worked out. It really did, and it was a learning process. And Alro Steel, to their ever lasting credit, they kept every promise they made us.
And we were their first during that acquisition. We were their first acquisition of a profitable business. They were used to buying bankrupt companies, and so Judy mentioning that now she thought it was the time, based on market conditions and our position in the market, was a great benefit to us as far as timing goes, because we didn't have to fire sale anything. We were able to do it our way, which was great.
Yeah, we're talking a lot about kind of a macro level organizational decisions. I'd like to kind of talk just at a personal level of things that you do as leaders, as habits, routines, tactics, things like that in your personal lives, messages that you would tell your kids. What are these types of things that are important to your ritual and you think are success tips?
My foundation is probably be curious. From when I was growing up, my father would take road trips with me in his car, and he would probably regret it because I never shut up. I always ask questions. And it's just my nature to be curious. But that's how I learned through the world. And by communicating with people and having people share experiences or information or whatever it is with me, and I'm ever curious. And so that curiosity drives me to ask questions. And those questions will lead me all kinds of crazy places. And sometimes those are good places and sometimes they're bad places. But when I'm able to focus it and really get down to asking good questions, and then when a good question has an answer that makes me more curious, I keep going down that path. And that's how I kind of developed into my role in the business and also into the electronic space and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent one. People that have that curiosity, the 5 why. When you're the 4-year-old kid that just continues to ask why, it really makes you think and root cause issues.
Parents love that.
Yeah. Anyone's got little kids knows. What are your thoughts? Do you have any thoughts on that, Mark? Or just
for me, it's I think it's doing the right thing even when no one's looking. And that's what I try and tell my kids, because if you can bad habits or good habits. It's easy to develop habits, and sometimes good habits can trump bad habits, but it's what you do on a daily basis, and it's that consistency of who you are, and the kind of developing the depth of your character. It doesn't mean perfection. That's not what it's about. It's when you fall down, you pick yourself back up. You admit when you're wrong. You apologize to people, but you know who you are inside, and you live true to your values. And I think that's whether it's personal, business, relationships. That's a foundation that I try and impart upon my kids. I try and live myself, and with our family. There's in town here. Figured it out the other day. I think between our family, my primary unit, my wife's family, her parents moved here. They did the reverse retirement. They came from South Carolina. They're native New Yorkers, but they were in South Carolina for 8 years, and then they came up here. There's 17 of us in town here. So you can't throw a stone without hitting a Lasky or a back off, in this town. So, and there's responsibility that comes with that. I think, and again, the opportunities that we've been given, and I'm very proud of the ability to work with my brothers. I think they do a fantastic job. They have skill sets I don't have, and I am grateful for those. Because if you think you have all the answers, that's usually the first road to something bad.
Luckily, we're all different. If we were the same, I don't think we'd get along in the business at all. So having the differences are challenging, but they're also very beneficial.
Growing up, did you think there was going to be a chance you could work together? Was there like sibling rivalry that happened, or were you always generally really friendly with each other?
So I was probably Mark's number one fan, when he was in high school, basketball and soccer and sports. And Jason, I just wanted to hang out with Jason and his friends. So I was always trying to, I was kind of the nudge. So I would just say, our childhood and our upbringing was, our parents did a good job, trying to keep us together and on the same page, and learning, having different experiences, but also learning a common set of values. So
something that was probably formative for the three of us too. We were summer camp kids, 8 weeks. So I went from the ages of 8 to 13, which was unusual for around here. Our dad grew up in Chicago, and that wasn't that unusual. Our mom had gone to camp for a little bit too, but so you usually went when you were 8. That was the youngest. So Jason and I, he started a different camp and then came to the same camp up at Eagle River, Camp Ojibwa. And then they figured, well, Brad, he's going to have older siblings there. So they sent him when he was 6. So he was the youngest kid in camp by 2 years. And came home with a head full of lice, I think, that first summer. But when you're that age and you're learning and you're kind of on your own for 2 months in a summer, and you're with kids you don't know, we didn't really know anybody. You develop some skills, and you develop some things that I think were pretty formative for us growing up. And you learn to cling to each other a little bit, because where's the familiar face. But I think overall it was a very, very positive experience for all of us, and formative.
I mean, I look at your dynamic, and I envy it in a lot of ways I would love it if, when I have 3 children, I had 3 boys, that they could come into a family business, take over something that I've created. Is there something you think your father did, or laid some groundwork, or had a family dynamic that you think was really something that stuck out to you, is how you're able to function and operate at an extraordinary level together?
He didn't push. So he was kind of the opposite. He stayed away from pushing anything. And in some ways it was good, in some ways it was bad, but I think it gave us the ability to make it our own, as opposed to feeling that we were obligated or that we had to for somebody else. It became our decision, and I think that felt better. From my perspective, it felt better than having to make a decision that was based on somebody else's desire. So
yeah, you kind of found it yourself, and it was more interesting that way.
And like Mark said, and to a certain extent Brad and myself, we didn't have a dream of doing what we're doing today. But we had different, I think, connections to why we are doing it now, and why we decided to kind of learn about it, to have the opportunity to do what we're doing today. So that really brought us all we needed to get in here. And had my dad pushed me, I typically, if they wanted to put structure around me, I wanted everything outside of that structure. I didn't want to be in it. But as soon as I was outside of it, I wanted something. So what I was looking for was balance, and to a certain extent, I needed to find that myself. So
I think we were blessed. We had 2 parents that loved us and supported us, and they were our biggest cheerleaders, and they backed us. And it didn't matter, what we were going to go into. So I think that was key. I tell this. So I was the first of the three. I came in 1999, and our company was about to be sold in 1998. We were anecdotally, we were on the 5-yard line going in. There was massive consolidation going on in the scrap metal recycling industry in the late 90s. The deal fell apart, and I was on my way to Northern Arizona University to get my master's. And our corporate, I came home. We weren't married yet, but we were engaged. Krista, my wife, and I came home, and our corporate attorney said, "Can I take you to lunch?" And I said, "Sure." Quinn Martin, Mark Martin's brother, actually, with so all these connections. And he said, "Listen," he said, "I know you want to be a teacher." And he said, "This deal's going to fall apart. Your dad's never going to ask you because he'd never want to put that kind of pressure on you. But you got a great business here, and I think there's an opportunity." Well, just my wife was not enamored with Flagstaff, Arizona. So Oshkosh looked pretty good to her. She liked the water. She grew up on the East Coast. She grew up on the water, and so we decided to give it a chance here. And my dad sat me down after a series of conversations, and he said 3 things to me that have stuck with me to this day. And these guys have heard this story ad nauseum. But the first thing he said, "Stay a year. I don't want to hear you love it. I don't want to hear you hate it till you've been here a year. After you've been here a year, you've given that's what we've asked for. If this isn't for you, go on your own way, and there's no guilt, there's nothing to that." The second thing he says is you can't stay if this isn't your passion. People here have dedicated their careers and their lives to being with this company, and we owe it to them to do the right thing. This isn't just a playground for family. And the third thing is, and probably the most important, is he said, if I have to choose, I'd rather have a son than a business partner. Which was really important, to hear. So, if he had to choose between me being in the business or, and us not having a good relationship because we're at each other's throats or just being a son, he'd rather have me as a son. So those are the 3 things that I came into the business under. And, that's 23 years ago now. So, and it must have looked pretty good because then they joined too.
I do. I think one of the things that's fun about this podcast is letting folks in the audience ask questions of things that they want to dig into or business principles that they'd like to learn from. We do have a couple mics in the back here. If anyone,
we know some of these people too. So
this is your chance.
It's gonna be tough.
So if we have any audience members that want to ask a question, Elle will come over with a mic and allow you guys to ask.
You've mentioned the word culture several times. Can you talk about what that is, a negative, a positive? For people who aren't in the business world, talk to us about what that is.
I'm going to turn this over. I just want to say one thing about it, because what we've learned, whether you have one intentionally, where you're intentional about it, or you don't, you have a culture. So it's your choice how you want to form that. You guys take it.
It is, and so if you don't foster a culture and you just let organics happen, it's very difficult at a lot of times to work within that framework. But by being purposeful about what your expectations are, how people should behave, what your reputation should stand for, things like that, it creates a rowboat with everybody rowing together. And I think that's really what culture does. It's the glue. And like you said, it's whether you foster it or not, you have it. And to make it work for you, it's best to pay attention to it. So. And
I would just add that it takes a lot of time and to be intentional, and it takes a lot of effort. And it's something that's abstract that can be influenced in many different ways. So it's really important to pay attention.
What is your culture?
Probably not the best people to answer that. However, I think that our culture is one of fairness. We give people a chance to prove what they can do, and if they fail, we say thank you, and we let them continue because they're learning. And I think that we call ourselves a learning organization because failure is a part of that process. And if we weren't to allow that and really make people very nervous in their job, I think it'd be very difficult to be where we are today. So we have trust and we have respect, and that's what we offer, and that's what we expect in return. And it seems to be working well. Anybody else?
How do you enforce, for lack of a better word, or how do you instill the culture?
I think it's having the right people, doing the right things, that it's hard to instill that. It's by finding the people that are, finding people that have that desire to be better, to improve, I don't know that you can, it's hard to instill that.
So you think it's more of like bringing them on or hiring in people that share similar values, and then something like
and
Yes,
also being
yes.
intentional with how you develop that and
Consistency.
putting them in,
Sure.
creating an environment where you reward success and you reward people who try.
Okay.
I think the other thing is it's one thing to say something, but people pay. And this goes for kids or anything. They watch what you do, and so it's who you are. It's not, words can be very empty if the actions don't follow. So a lot of times it's up to us to model that. What's acceptable, what's not acceptable. Admit when you're wrong. What's the better way, and what do we want? What do we want to see? Who do we want to be? We have a tagline in our company to be the preferred choice. So that's from a business standpoint. That means we might not do every deal. Some deals we don't want to do, but we want to have the opportunity because people like to work with us. That's also to be the preferred choice employer. We're not always going to be the highest on the pay scale, but we believe that the culture and the way people feel when they work in our organization can trump some of that, and that's what we strive for.
Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen. We spoke about the culture. I believe that, from my perspective, your culture is a paradigm example of what a good corporate or business culture should be. And I think we've all benefited from this, and I appreciate it very much. And if you don't believe me, and I didn't get this, all I have to do is ask your employees. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
You got a question over here, Al?
Thanks for the knowledge, gentlemen. All three of you are deeply involved in various community causes. Your organization supports a million things. Could you speak to how you got there in terms of that, developing that sense of stewardship and how that's important to you?
Yeah, I'd like to start just because, I think it goes back to my grandfather. When he escaped from Kanela, Ukraine, and came over, he had to depend on a lot of communities to help him. And when he got here, that also was a big piece of who he was to give back to the community. That filtered down through our parents, and it was something that we were able to see and be a part of. And we continue that individually and also collectively. And I would just say that's from my perspective where it started.
Absolutely. I left University of Denver and I came back to Oshkosh and I made this my home. And I said, if I don't get involved, I don't have a right to complain. So it forced me to get involved. And you know what? I can complain now. Because I'm a part of, solutions happening. So, yeah.
They said it great. I think what the other thing too is it's allowed us to we each have different passion projects and that we've gotten involved with, and there's a lot of opportunity to get involved in the community and just a lot of great people and organizations, and we just feel very fortunate to be in a position to be able to get involved and give back.
I want to talk about that for just a second, of the different projects you're involved in, or what you would like to see more of, or where Oshkosh should go. This is your opportunity, I think, to share maybe some of those opinions, popular, unpopular, of what we need.
Growth. This community is, I think that, I have a personal opinion that over the generations, I think Oshkosh has become kind of a misplaced in the valley of the greater region. And in that misplacement, I think it's substantially hurt us. We're kind of looked at as kind of, down on the bottom of the valley, when really we're really centralized in the valley itself. I'd say Fond du Lac's. But the fact is, I think that for culture had a lot to do with that over I think a generation or two in the community of how things used to happen here, and I think that some of that has kind of stuck. Now we're coming out of it and kind of moving in different ways, but I really think that it's growth. We really want to be attractive. So to be attractive, or I guess in order to achieve growth, you have to be attractive. So what resources can we have here? And one thing that I say in the Valley is, if we have a resource in Oshkosh that is repeated in Fond du Lac and Neenah and Appleton, what does that do to bring people through? To live in a region? It doesn't. What it does is it parochializes every community. And I think that we're better being combined, as that we can act better and do more and do greater things and offer much more as a region. And I think that approach has a little bit gone.
Do you have any specific ideas of what that could be?
I have one. I'd like my brother back on the RDA board. Can I say
that? Just to add on to that, I think you look around Oshkosh and you look at the things we have. We have this wonderful university. We have the waterfront. We have these wonderful businesses. We have caring people. We have people who are passionate here. We have people like you who are opening businesses and starting the conversations. And I would just say that the growth is, from a state perspective, we have to be more competitive to bring people here, stay here. The university, I think, and I'm going to say this just because I believe this, I think this should be a 20,000 student university. I think, some of the redundancy throughout the valley, I think, would be nice to have here in Oshkosh, and really have people stay here and build the programs and have them start here, live here, experience here, and then, raise a family and work here. And I just, from a little bit of a selfish perspective, I wish that we would take advantage of that a little more.
I'd just like to say too, so because my wife is a transplant, we've had this conversation, and she's brought friends here, and they think this is like the greatest place on earth. And I think one of the things we have is a self-esteem problem, because we're here, and it's like anything else. You see the warts because we live here every day, but we have a lot to be proud of, and a lot to be to promote. And sometimes I just think that we don't, because it's what we're used to. You have generations of families that are here, and it just is what it is. But I can tell you that from the outside point of view, this is a great place to be.
Yeah. Got some big shoes to fill, Rob. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No.
You guys could probably live anywhere, but what does keep you coming back here to Oshkosh? You got business in Fond du Lac and business in Nebraska, and you guys have been all over at universities, but obviously family for sure. But, what are some of the qualities at Oshkosh that kind of brought you back here and keeps you here?
Absolutely.
My wife would tell you I'm the biggest cheerleader. So, of Oshkosh. We lived on the east. I lived in Boston. She's from that area, and I'd walk down the street and say hi to people, and she'd say, "People are going to think something's wrong with you. You're going to get hit in the face. People don't do that here." But that's what I love about the Midwest. That's what I love about Oshkosh. It's not only has it been a great place to be from, but it's a great place to be. I think that it's been enriching for our kids. There's a lot of opportunities to get involved. It's small enough but big enough, and like Jason and Brad said, I think there's opportunities within the region too that we can leverage. And the Fox Valley region is just such just a treasure. It really is. And with the New North and with the things that go EDC and just the resource of the university. And the waterway and actually even the highway system, from where we are, it's really just such a jumping off point. But and there's some great cheerleaders in the city, Rob, with the chamber, Go EDC, Amy Albright. But you need that. You need that. You want it to be a place. There's nothing wrong with leaving, but you want it to be a place that people feel that they can come back to as well. And you can come home again.
Absolutely, and there's a lot up and coming here, which is really exciting, and we see it. You can see it in the building of what's happening with different apartments or different complexes that are going up. With the arena was a nice addition. We have a great redevelopment area that is primed for something great to happen. So we have a lot of ongoing opportunities. We're not done. Oshkosh isn't done. So Oshkosh is just kind of beginning to go to its next phase, and that to me is exciting, and it's exciting to raise kids in that time in this time as well.
Yeah. Any questions at all? Any thoughts? Yeah, Gary.
In your conversations, you haven't mentioned Fox Valley Tech at all. Is that their contributions to the community more focused on Appleton and fizzling in this area?
No, I don't think so. That was probably just an oversight, Gary. I think the tech community, as a matter of fact, we've been a part of the NUMA, Northeast Wisconsin Manufacturing Alliance, and that's a big push. Been involved in some opportunities to get involved with how we can promote that more. I think it's something to remove a stigma. Work with parents, work with the guidance counselors at the school. Not everybody needs to go to a 4-year liberal arts university, and the trades and not just the trades. There's a bunch of opportunities now that the tech has filled in with career and life opportunities that I think is we're blessed to have that in the organization. It's something we've all gotten involved with. So if we didn't mention it, it was just an oversight.
Yeah, I mean, Wisconsin's a manufacturing state. We're a huge contribution to the country, and with what we do here, and in all areas of the state, including Oshkosh, and so those resources are critical to keeping that going.
And I'll also say that our company, we're involved with Moraine Park and Fond du Lac, and do a lot of school of works things as well within our fabrication shop, and it's something that is very important to have the exposure and provide those experiences. So,
any other questions? Yeah. We got a mic for you so we can get it on the record.
So, Jason, you'll appreciate this. I'm very curious too. So I'm curious, Mark, when you were talking about when you were at camp, when you were 8 to 13, I think you said, and you learned some life skills or coping skills, can you share with us one of them?
I think it's something I can share. When you're 8 to 13, at all boys camp. I would say it was a very competitive camp. So I think you learned how to win, you learned how to lose. We saw kids get kicked out of camp because they couldn't control their temper, and they'd throw fits and things like that. But but you're there, and you have to learn how to make relationships. You have to learn how to make friends. Otherwise, it's gonna be a very lonely. We probably wouldn't have enjoyed camp. We've all taken our kids back to camp. We've been back since. We've maintained a relationship with the camp. My senior in high school this year, so just the difference in kids. My oldest, he wanted to get, when we said we'll take you where you want to go when you graduate high school. So our oldest, he's a sophomore in college now. He wanted to go on a golf trip, so I took him on a golf trip. That was what he wanted to do. Our middle guy wants to go to camp. He wants to go to Ojibwa with like 5 friends and stay in the cabins and play sports and mess around the woods so it's something that's been lifelong. It's absolutely gorgeous up there. Eagle River, Wisconsin. It's just
actually, I'm sending my 2 daughters right now. They go to Camp Agawak in Minocqua, so I'm trying to pass that on, something that for them to experience and see and be a part of.
I went to camp as well, and I learned lots of things, good things and bad things.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Matt.
Guys, thank you for being here today. It's excellent. I do have a request. The Jackson Street Bridge, with being in Fond du Lac and the fab department there and metal and everything, can you help out with the Wisconsin Street Bridge? I'm sorry, Jackson Street.
I don't know if we can help get the parts.
And that is something, yeah.
No opinions on the bridge. Huh? Okay. Sensitive subject.
Thought better
over
of it.
here. Yeah. Rob, what's up?
Yeah, just going to Jackson Street Bridge is going to relocate the chamber someday. But that's all good. That change is good. Yeah. I was just going to, you guys be happy to know that with NUMA and New North and the Green Bay Chamber, Fox Cities Chamber, Oshkosh Chamber, and Envision Greater Fond du Lac are going down to Dallas next month to call together on site selectors in Dallas that, make decisions on site location. So, I mean, it's a good step. Got more to do, but I think your advice is, well taken and very timely, and try to keep doing those sorts of things as a region.
How are we doing on time, El? Do we have time for any more questions at all? Are we done? Oh, it's gift time. Okay. We got a small token of our appreciation here for you guys. And thank you again for your time today, offering these different types of insights. It's really been a privilege.
Thank you so much.
This was more fun than I thought it was going to be.
Oh, good. Join me in a round of applause for these guys.
Thanks for having us.